All right, perfect. This is what I was talking about earlier, color theory, and I was saying yellow is the brightest color. So now we can watch a video telling us why that is.
When you look
this
at
is
most
long.
sink
All right.
designs, the knob that controls
Let's
the
see
hot
if this is
water is
good.
usually red, and the knob that controls cold water is usually blue. We associate red with hot and blue with cold.
I mean, I wasn't alive during Reagan, so I don't really know. Yeah, the economy, if I remember correctly, the economy was really bad in the 70s. Reagan was elected, and then the economy bounced back. If I remember correctly.
This phenomenon is an instance of cross-modal correspondence, a perception where multiple sensory modalities interact. In this case, our visual perception is connected to our perception of temperature. There are a few other examples of this, like
right, 'cause it's
synesthesia,
waves.
a word that traces back to Greek words that mean together sensation. People with synesthesia can associate things like numbers and colors, so 2 might be
I don't
violet,
do this,
and
but I know
5 might be
I know
yellow.
someone who actually
There's
does
also
do
the
this.
McGurk effect, where the same sound can elicit different perceptions based on how we see a person speaking that sound.
Oh yeah, isn't that what is it? Isn't that like the Laurel and whatever? Huh. All right, let's keep going.
Ba 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 ba.
Here, our visual perception and auditory perception are becoming intertwined. The Booba Kiki effect is another instance of this. If I present these two images to you, which one would you call Booba and which one would you call Kiki? Both American college undergraduates and Tamil speakers in India are more likely to call the left shape Kiki and the right shape Booba. The way
yeah,
we
I've heard
see
about
these
this
shapes
before.
is interacting with the way we hear sounds. But for this video, I'm mostly concerned
So
with
yeah, there's like, because again, when it comes, in case you don't know, when it comes to gender, so biologically, it would be a huge problem if you couldn't identify who is who you could have children with, right? Because then you would just be guessing. That would be a problem, right? If you want kids, that's a problem. So biologically, we are very good at identifying faces. Now that's really good for memorizing people, but one of the things is that's also why we see faces and things that we normally don't. But also, back to this, men generally have more if I remember correctly, generally have sharper features, and women generally have rounder features, if I remember correctly. And so what this means is, just by looking at someone's face, you could tell if they're a man or a woman. It's something, and it makes sense why, again, we associate certain sounds with it, because it's something biologically that we're born with, that we have in us, that we got from evolution. Oh yeah, voice is another one. Now I know there are like certain exceptions, but that is another one generally, is like voice. So by the way they sound, and even if it's not like, even if it's a low pitched woman, you could still generally tell if it's a woman. Yeah, exactly. I think it's part of, also like,
see these shapes is interacting with the way we
like
hear.
Kiki, it's very like it's like it's hard to explain. Like it sounds pointy, where like it's cut, so it's like there's sharp sounds that, so you associate it with the sharp image. Where boba is it almost sounds more round, so it kind of, you associate with this. That's the whole idea.
Berlin and Paul Kay studied 20 different languages from around the world, and the words they have for different colors. They identified a total of 11 basic color categories.
Okay.
White, black, red, green, yellow, blue, brown, purple, pink, orange, and gray.
All right, let me look at this real quick. Is there anything that's missing? So it's interesting they have pink. Do we really see pink in nature that much? I mean, we have it a lot in like clothes, for example. I guess like flowers too. It's interesting a lot of cultures had this. Interesting they had gray, right? It makes sense though.
In particular, they noticed that some languages didn't have all 11 words, and that there was
Makes
a pattern
sense.
for which words a language had. Words for brown, purple, pink, orange, and gray were never present in languages that didn't already distinguish between green and blue.
Wow. This is really interesting. That's something I would have never
Broke this
thought of.
pattern down into a sequence. Purple, pink, orange, and gray come after brown. Brown comes after blue. Blue is preceded by both green and yellow. Green and yellow come after red. And finally, the most basic language categories are dark cool and light warm. encompassing the set of all cool colors and warm
Okay.
colors as two categories. Now, it's important to mention that this study has been criticized. It assumes an
What's wrong with it?
ethnocentric bias based on Western scientific and political thought. It's basically implying this idea of progress, where more primitive cultures have not sufficiently evolved to
Yeah, like more likely, like assuming this is true, what's more likely is they just don't have these colors in nature, so they wouldn't have a word for it. That's
capture
most
the
likely
true
what
categories of color that the
probably
Western
is
languages
why.
have.
And again, like
I don't think
fl-
Berlin
oh
and
yeah,
Kay
flamingos
have
are pink.
successfully
Oh,
proved
fun fact. So in case you don't know, the reason why flamingos are pink is because when they're born, they're not born pink, but because their diet consists of crabs and crabs have a red pigment, it turns their feathers pink.
that
more you know.
speakers of so-called primitive languages can't perceive the same range of colors that we can. They just use different category systems to describe them. But what can be said conclusively is that according to the World Color Survey, people all over the world seem to perceive blue as cool and red as warm. Now, this might not be
Interesting.
particularly surprising. We make all kinds of associations.
I mean, reasons for this? Actually, no. It makes sense, right? Because ice and water is blue, and I did learn water actually is blue. It's just extremely light, so you don't notice it until there's more of it. But yeah, because you might think like I did. I thought water was clear, and it's just like blue because of the sky or other stuff. But no, it actually does have distinct blue. So ice makes sense, and then fire makes sense too because when you light, pretty much every culture has seen fire. Makes sense they associate red with fire. The sky is purple. Yeah, I remember hearing, and again, it makes sense because when the sun goes down, you see different colors. Because I remember that it's the same idea with how a bird's feathers, like a bird's feathers are, I mean, a blue jay's feathers are black, but the way the light hits it makes it look blue. So it makes sense that the sky is purple. Oh, we can't see that. Oh, I didn't know that. All right, and that makes sense because actually that's probably what birds with ultraviolet rays can see. Interesting, and it makes sense too because I know that the sun has UV rays, which is why we need sunblock, especially when it's really hot out. Yeah, water is actually blue. It's just extremely faint, so you don't notice it until there's a large quantity of it.
between colors and concepts. In video games,
Glass isn't clear; it's also slightly blue. Even less, isn't glass breaking? I've heard about that. That's interesting. And also, I want to say, is glass breaking a chemical reaction? As I remember hearing, it is. Oh no, this physical. Okay, never mind then.
the health bar is often red, the mana bar is usually blue, and stamina is green. We often associate red with love, anger, or
Makes
power.
sense.
Blue has a
Actually, if you think about it, it makes sense because, for example, when someone's... Oh, wait. Think about this, right? So health, right? We have blood, that's obvious. But know what else we have? When someone's angry, their face gets lit up. Their face becomes red. When someone is in love or they might feel maybe embarrassed or in a situation I've been before, their face will also turn red. So that makes sense.
sophisticated, reliable corporate vibe. Orange is usually associated with energy, taste,
Really?
extroversion, or amusement. But
I don't know
these
why that
symbols
is.
vary cross-culturally. Buddhist monks wear orange robes, where orange symbolizes enlightenment. In placebo studies,
Mm-hmm. Maybe
pills
because of
with
fire.
hot colors like red or yellow work better as stimulants, whereas pills with cool colors like blue or purple work better as depressants. These results do
Interesting.
seem to depend on culture, though. Purple was historically associated with royalty,
All right.
because purple
We'll
dye
explain
was
why,
made
yep.
from a species of sea snail, which excreted it from a single gland, the hypobranchial gland, in very small quantities.
Yep.
This made the dye very rare, and was usually only
All right, so real quick, just to add to this, because you didn't say it. So they would have to capture 1,000 snails just to create one vial of purple dye. That's why it was so expensive.
available to the very wealthy. So just because of this coincidence, that psychological association emerged.
Mm-hmm.
The one color association that remains consistent across cultures. is
Purple's a cool
and
color, by
warm.
the way.
This might just be coincidence.
Well, not
but it
cool, I
taps
mean,
into a much more
looks nice.
universal one. Our skin gets red when we're warm.
Yeah.
And goes blue when we're cold.
Oh,
When
yeah,
we
you're
gaze
right.
at a
I forgot
warm,
about
sunny
that.
landscape, we're presented with warm colors. When we gaze at a cold, overcast day, we're presented with cool colors. So what even is color in the first place? I'm going to argue that there are two ways of describing it,
All right,
which
what
are
are the two
basically
ways?
captured by two figures, Newton and Goethe. Let's
All right,
start
why?
with Newton in the
How does
scientific
Newton
description
relate?
of light.
All right, the prism.
Visible light can be understood as waves of electromagnetic
Mm-hmm.
radiation. The human eye can perceive wavelengths of about 400 to 700 nanometers.
Some animals can
where one
perceive some of
nanometer
this
is
too.
1/1000th of a meter. The visible colors on this spectrum increase from red to violet, following the mnemonic Roy G. Biv, which is also a great song by Boards of Canada.
Okay.
The retinas of our eyes
check
have
it out
things
later.
called cone
At
cells.
off stream.
We have 3 types of those. One responds really well to blue light, one to green, and one to red. The colors we see in the world are the result of the way in which these receptors respond to different levels of blues, greens, and reds that are reflected by materials.
Yeah, because we have those cones in our
In
eyes.
the book, The Physics and Chemistry of Color by Kurt
Unless you're
Nassau,
colorblind, of
he
course.
enumerates 15 different causes of color, including everything from the incandescence of flames, the rotations of blue ice and water, and the interference of soap bubbles. A lot of our scientific understanding of color has its roots in an experiment by Isaac Newton conducted in 1704. He constructed a triangular prism and shone a sunbeam through it, refracting its
By the
light.
way, I still
Colors
don't know how we
emerged
just
from this
figured this
process of
out. Like,
refraction, which he called a spectrum.
also, by the way, what I found interesting is the amount of time it takes a normal person to learn calculus isn't even like Isaac Newton figured out calculus faster than the average person takes to learn it. Isn't that crazy? Like it kind of makes sense if he's smart, but
About
still.
100 years later, Goethe, the German poet responsible for Faust, became interested in color too.
Okay.
Goethe knew about
Oh,
Newton's
poet,
experiments
so a different-
and tested
different
it himself
person.
with prisms he borrowed from a
Different
friend.
mind.
As you do. We've all got that one friend who always has a bunch of prisms on hand.
No.
While Newton was concerned
don't
with
have that friend.
systematically analyzing color in a scientific way, Goethe was interested in color as we see it. He conducted experiments with colored shadows. He noticed that if a colored light is shone on an object, and a white light is shone on its opposite side, we perceive the shadow as the color's complement. In his color wheel, he situated these complementary colors opposite one another.
Ooh.
In his view, our perception strives for unity. Yellow demands violet, orange demands blue, purple demands
Interesting.
green, and vice versa.
So he
Another
came up
instance
with
of this is the
complementary
phenomenon
colors,
of
or at least figured it
accidental
out.
color. Here, I've made the screen yellow. Pause the video and stare into the yellow for 30 seconds or so.
All
and then
right. Do you want to do this? Oh wait, no. I already did this in psychology. I mean, we could do this though. So actually, let me explain what happens while we do this. All right? Because I learned this in psychology, so I'll teach it to you guys. So what happens is basically there's a muscle in our eye that basically turns a switch on and off. Now, basically, in order for this to work, you need to look at the center. So I'll put my mouse here. So basically, it will turn the cones in your eyes on or off. That will show color. What happens is after you stare at it for a while, it turns lazy. Now, if you notice, after this, the screen will turn white. And what happens when it turns white is it's reflecting all the colors. Because your eyes are lazy and the switches aren't as effective, you will see not yellow, but
Pause the video and stare into the yellow for 30 seconds
ready?
or so.
If you stared at
And
it,
then
you will
unpause.
see the complement of yellow. Because it's your cones not turning, it's because your eye isn't turning it off
Your
yet.
eyes had become accustomed to the yellow, and when the screen abruptly switched to white,
Mm-hmm.
your perception conjured a violet hue. Our eye wants to bring harmony.
It's actually closer to blue. So the example my teacher used in psychology, he had an American flag, except it was yellow, black, I think. He used opposite colors so the American flag would reflect on it. Are blue jays naturally blue? Here, let me look it up. Are blue jays naturally blue? So just so I can show this. Yeah, it's showed by scattering light through mollified cells in the surface feather. So what this basically means is so like for it to be naturally blue, that would mean there would have to be a dye, like a pigment that's making it blue. That's blues being reflected. What's actually happening is light's hitting it, all the colors, and it's only letting the blue light escape from the feathers. So it's trapping all the other light inside its feathers. Like it's designed in such a way where that happens.
To our visual experience. The eye creates freedom for itself by producing the opposite of that which is forced upon it, creating in this way a satisfying whole. Goethe was also very concerned with how color affects us. The color palette of a scene.
Oh, by the
tells us-
way, so the example he showed us, if the screen was black, you would not see that bluish violet. And the reason why simply is because black light is absorbing all the light, so no light's being reflected to you, so there's no blue light for your eyes to see.
about the seasons and cycles of our world. They show us how to tell one thing from another. We wouldn't be able to spot these berries if they weren't brightly colored. We see certain colors as warm and textural. We see others as cold and spatial. Yellows seem to come towards us.
Yeah, so there's different types of colorblind, right? There's one where a cone in your eye is missing, so a certain range of colors you can't see. And then if you're missing all the cones, which is extremely rare, you just see in black and white, so you really only detect motion. Alright, I'll check it after the video.
Blues seem to recede away. Not only is color associated with temperature, but also proximity and distance. Goethe took this so seriously that his home was painted very deliberately, with a yellow dining room to create a sense of
Like,
warmth
this
and
looks
pleasure,
nice though,
and
doesn't
a
it?
greenish-blue
Like, he's-
study to promote a stimulating, calming environment. Where Newton's approach was analytic, Goethe's approach was poetic.
art.
These aren't necessarily contradictory views either. They're just two ways of looking at
Yeah,
things.
one is
To
like how it
elucidate
works,
this
and one is
distinction,
what
consider
makes it
the
look good.
scientist Mary. She exists in a black and white world, but
Okay.
she can still study color. She has access to physical descriptions of color.
Mm-hmm.
She can tell you which wavelengths correspond to each color.
But she doesn't know what colors look good with the others.
Can't see them. She has no conscious experience of color. Now suppose Mary is able to exit this black and white world and take in the perceptual experience of color for the first time. The question is, will Mary gain any new understanding? This thought experiment was proposed by Frank Jackson in 1982. Newton approached color as
Wait,
Mary
isn't there
did
like a
from-
thing? I don't know if it actually. Isn't there like a thing where like you could make like you could add cones to people's eyes? I don't know if we have that technology. I think
her black and white world. While Goethe was concerned with the understanding.
I'm curious
Mary
if it did. I would
achieved
imagine
from
you would bring it
actually
up.
seeing color,
Otherwise, I'll assume
Goethe
it didn't.
urged
It doesn't
that physical
exist.
descriptions of color only tell half the story. We can't separate the color in the world from the color as we see it. He didn't view humans as passive observers of things. For him, the outer world calls forth the inner world, meeting in a participatory interaction. Color isn't just light particles out there in the world, nor is it a conscious representation of the light in the world. Instead, color arises through the interplay of light and sight. So in this way, we don't just take color in, color emerges from our interaction with the world.
Rather, real quick too, in case you don't know, our eyes will purposely make contrast. So you ever see those images where there's a shadow and then there's like tiling, and then they'll say these two colors are the same. Let me see. I don't know what to search up to find it, but if you know what I'm talking about, like two things supposed to have a shadow but they're the same color, it's because your eyes purposely create contrast that should be there. Like your eyes do play tricks on you. It's very interesting. It's definitely a
In a
rabbit hole
sense,
you could go
we
down.
Put a little bit of ourselves
And he's already
into
touching the
color.
surface on it, which is why I
In the
like this
book
video.
Interaction of Color, the artist Joseph Albers discusses the way in which color is relative. In visual perception, a color is almost never seen as it really
Yup.
is, as it
That's-
physically is. This fact makes color the most relative medium in art. Here's an experiment he describes. There are 3 pots of water in front of you, containing warm, lukewarm, and cold water.
Okay.
You dip your hands into each outer container, left hand in the leftmost pot, and right hand in the rightmost pot. You perceive 2 different temperatures, warm on the left and cold on the right. But then you dip both hands in the middle container. You perceive 2 different temperatures again, but this time in reverse order. Your left hand feels cold, and your right hand feels warm. But in reality, the water is neither of these temperatures. It's lukewarm.
That's a good way to explain
the
it.
context of our prior experience.
Yeah, I think there's truth to what you're saying too, because again, there's no way to know what someone else is seeing, and part of it does depend on experience too of what you've seen in the past, which I do think influences it, and then also like genetics too. There's like variants, and it's still something that's being researched, which it's so interesting.
Altered our perception. In the same way that the relative temperature of our hands deceives us.
Oh,
in
by
this
the way,
act-
another interesting fact when it comes to receptors. So, whenever we feel extreme heat, here's what happens. So, our skin is able to detect hot and cold. Now, over time, through evolution, our skin has developed to where if something's really hot, our cold receptors will also go off counterintuitively. The reason why is they'll work overtime to act as heat receptors to let us know this is hot, don't touch it. What does this mean though? If I take really hot water, pour it on your hand here, take really cold water, pour it on your hand here, and they're touching right next to each other, you will feel that as burning hot for an instant. Because your brain will tell you, because hot and cold goes off, your brain will tell you this is extremely hot. But it's not. It's okay. So after an instant it's okay. But for that moment, you want to bring it away because it feels really hot.
Optic illusion, where physical fact and our conscious experience don't match. Optical illusions also deceive. They cause us to see colors other than those with which we are confronted physically. Remember this dress? As
Bro,
of the
why you gotta
recording
bring
of
this up?
video, this meme blew up just over 8 years ago. People argued endlessly.
I think the dress goes to what you're saying too, Nick News. What makes hallucinogens? All right, let's go into that real quick. I don't remember exactly what it is. What is the chemical in mushrooms? I think it's a good. All right, so there's basically a chemical that goes on your mind that stimulates the brain, and what happens is basically it's almost like you're dreaming in real life. So your brain will see things that aren't actually there, kind of like almost like you're dreaming. And what's really interesting, this is the name of the drug, right? This is the thing that goes in your brain. What's really interesting about this is that after you, from what I understand, because I have researched this before, found it interesting. According to what I've read, once you take magic mushrooms, apparently there's like a period of time where if you take them again, they won't do anything because your brain just won't let them work for whatever reason. It just won't work. So there's like a down period. What's also interesting is that they're not addictive. Now they are still banned, and if you think about it, it makes sense because do you really want, like, think of it this way. Do you really want like people out in the streets that are on mushrooms seeing things that aren't there? That's not really good for society. It makes sense why they're banned. They are not addictive though, which is interesting. They're not inherently addictive. So although you could be addicted to mushrooms, it's not like you take it once and you're addicted. Yeah, it doesn't really have a benefit. That's another thing too. There's no real benefit, so it's fine. Yeah, this is the drug. You could look this up. Here, this is the name of it. So if you look that up, you could go down a rabbit hole. There's 20. All right, that's another thing. Yeah, like also they're illegal. Yeah, I have no intention of taking them. I just found it interesting because I wanted to know what it is. Yeah, I have no intention of taking them. Yeah, even if you think about it, you don't want to, like, you think it might be cool to see things that aren't there until you do it, and then all of a sudden, especially like you could harm yourself without knowing it. So yeah, but that's the name of the chemical, because I believe your brain produces it too, to an extent.
Whether the dress was black and blue or white and gold. The reason nobody could agree was because people's visual systems were interpreting the photograph.
Yeah, this is like
in
what you're
different
saying, Nick
ways.
News.
In particular, different people assumed different conditions of illumination. When we look at a scene with different levels of illumination, we're able to
My dad
recognize
didn't see
different
blue.
colors as the
Everyone
same,
else in my family
a
did, though.
phenomenon called color constancy. Depending on how you initially interpreted the illumination of this photograph, you could see the dress with completely different colors. Here's another illusion you've
Here's the
probably
one.
seen.
This is it. All right. He's gonna say it. Let me let him say it. Let me let him say it.
We have a cylinder casting a shadow on a floor of tiles. It appears that the tiles A and B are different colors. A looks gray,
Guess
while B
what?
looks white. But when you
Ready?
scrutinize the image more closely, you
on.
realize that these tiles are
They're the same color, and you don't notice till you do that. Like, look. Look. Am I breaking your brain or what? They're the same exact color. Isn't that crazy? That's just one example. This is what I wanted to pull up. I'm glad it's in the video. Your brain messes with you intentionally because it creates contrast and it creates things that it thinks should be there. It guesses for you. Yeah, I love color. I love color stuff like this too. It's so interesting. Oh, the actual dress is blue, but my dad didn't see blue. That was interesting. So like everyone in my family saw it except him. So we're like, what? Yeah, look at this. Doesn't this hurt your mess with you at all? It's crazy.
fact identical.
The same color.
The context of the scene and the interpretation we have for what's happening is changing the way we see these colors. Even now, when you know that these colors are the same,
You still
don't see
can't.
them
You
that
still
way.
don't see it that way.
Okay,
Exactly.
last one. Take a look at the circles in the middle. The left circle appears red, and the right circle appears green. But once again, if I zoom in,
They're both-
it becomes clear that each circle is in fact
No
yellow.
way.
All of these illusions demonstrate a key insight that Goethe knew.
How?
Colors,
That's
as we see them, are not merely light. Color is a conscious event resulting from the interplay between the observer and the observed. The French post-impressionist artist Paul Cézanne wrote
Another
that
one, so
color is-
I don't know if I remember, but I'll explain it real quick. Another interesting one was a Rubik's Cube. One brown on top, brown on the side. They were the same brown, but your brain perceived the that was shaded as a lighter brown.
the place where our brain and the universe meet. So what do philosophers make of all this? Well, there's a number of different takes people have, but in this video I'll be discussing two theories that I think capture the ancient disagreement between Newton and Goethe.
Contrast. When you make a lot of images, you kind of get better at perspective, but it's not avoidable. Yeah, it's a thing of evolution, and if you think about it, it makes sense, because if you're like in nature, you want to see things that pop out to you, because even if they're the same, almost the same color, you want it to stick out to you, because what if it's like a predator, but because you have your genes dictated that you see colors as how they are, you get attacked because you didn't notice an enemy.
Let's start with the
like
Newton side
a
of
predator.
things, and one of the most famous distinctions in all of philosophy, John Locke's primary and secondary qualities.
Oh, John Locke.
Primary
He's a very
qualities are the
famous
properties of things
thinker.
as they are in the world, independent of our perception. Take a basketball, for example. The fact that the basketball is spherical is an inherent property of that object,
Mm-hmm.
and does not depend on an observer seeing it that way. Then there are secondary qualities, the stuff that depends on the observer, like smell, taste, sound,
Mm-hmm.
and, of course, color. The basketball being orange and the sound it makes when you bounce it are each secondary qualities.
Yeah.
Objects don't exactly have colors in this way, but they have
Bro,
dispositional
that hurts my head
properties
a
to
little
give
bit.
rise to colors. The basketball is not orange itself, but exists in such a way that it appears orange.
Yeah,
to the
because the
observer
light
when they look
reflects
at it under the right
orange.
conditions. Some people call this a received view of color, since the properties of the object result in the observer receiving that sense experience. On the other side of things, we have a take that's more in the spirit of Goethe. Evan Thompson,
How would the world be if everything was black and white? That's a really good question. I think it would be much more difficult to notice things. And again, from what I understand, if you have like black and white vision, it's really difficult to see someone if they're not moving, from what I understand. Like my psychology teacher told a story about this where like he was like standing in front of someone he knew that had could only see black and white, and he thought she was like being rude because she didn't notice him, but actually it was just that because he wasn't moving, she couldn't really see him. So I think that's
J.J.
part of it.
Gibson, and some others put forward what's known as an action-based ecological theory of color. On first glance, it seems pretty similar to the received view. They still don't consider colors intrinsic properties of things in the world, independent of any perceiver. It depends in part on the perception of the color itself. Color is a relational property, connecting the environment with the perceiving animal. But this view also wants to emphasize the fact that at the end of the day, we're still basically animals. He who
Yep.
understands the baboon would do more for metaphysics than Locke. That quote is from none other than Charles Darwin. Biologists will always tell us that an organism can't be understood in isolation, apart from the world. And in the same way, that organism's environment, or niche, can't be understood apart from the organism.
By
In
the
fact,
way, there's
the
an
an-
interesting theory out there that basically says that you can only really understand. I mean, what am I saying? If there's a niche that does exist, then a living organism must fulfill it at some point.
animal and its environment are connected
Just-
in a
yeah,
much
it's just like
deeper
black and white
way than you might
pictures.
expect.
Okay.
An organism finds itself in an environment, but they don't just hang out there. They interact with their surroundings, based on the physical signals the environment gives them. Through this, they transform the environment, and simultaneously, the environment itself transforms the organism by defining what traits are selected evolutionarily. The organism and the environment co-determine each other. This codeterminacy is a bit of a problem for people like Locke and Newton. For them, perception involves representing items of sense data, which are the immediate objects of perception. These representations stand in for some physical object in the external world. So we aren't actually looking out at the world, we're looking through our representations. This view treats the animal and its environment as separate systems, rather than two components
But
of one
you have to
system.
look at
In the
it
ecological
together.
approach to visual perception,
Like, I
Gibson
think there is
expresses
value to looking at it separate to understand what it is, but in order to get a good grasp on it, you need to look at it together. Yeah, that's a good way to say it, I guess, mastering photos. By the way, what do you guys think of the Twitch chat I have? Do you think, as I finally have that up, what do you guys think of it? Is it good? Too much? Is it good? Because I'll also have that for YouTube too. I think that'll help.
Some issues with this take. As animals, our perception is always guided. Perception and action evolve together and are inseparable. Our perception guides the activity in our motor
Actually,
systems.
I didn't use Streamlabs. What I used was I used something else. I don't even remember the name now. Oh yeah, I used Stream Elements. That's what I used. So, because I found it out, but Streamlabs didn't do exactly what I wanted. And actually, I would just use Stream Elements for like 20 minutes before stream. I was it's so much easier to use than Streamlabs, and it doesn't seem as like scammy. So I might actually move everything I have there. By the way, I finally fixed commands. Apparently I had it turned off. So this is an example that actually works now.
And our motor system guides perception. For Gibson, environments have particular relational properties called affordances, things that give us an opportunity to interact with them. Trees, in relation to certain animals, afford climbing. They can be described as climb-upable. The other side of the coin is effectivities, the properties of animals that allow an opportunity for interaction with the environment. Lizards and monkeys can climb things, so they possess the effectivity climbing thing. These kinds of properties are really weird, since they're almost objective and subjective at the same time. It's both a fact of the environment and a fact of behavior. It's both physical and psychological. Gibson ultimately wants to say that the colors we see have lawful correlations with particular ecological properties like affordances. So what's even the difference here with the Lockean or the Newtonian view?
Speaking of element, why is Nightbot named Nightbot if it's here 24/7? That's a good question. I mean, if you think about that, I guess because if something's here 24/7, usually I think it's implied that it's there towards the night. That's what's more important. Like, it's just assumed that you'll be there during the day.
Both agree that
That's my
color
guess.
depends on the observer and can't be understood as intrinsic properties of the world, independent of our perception. Neuroscience can model the features of color as we perceive them, so it might be tempting to conclude that object color is really just an illusion, and we
But
can
it's more
reduce
than
it to
that.
neural states in the visual system. But Thompson and Gibson want to avoid this. Instead of situating color exclusively in the brain, they want to take into account the relation with the environment.
Right, because
Instead of
if you
color-
look at it objectively, then you'll miss the part where how our brain will perceive contrast that's not actually there. Like the
being
examples
a
we showed.
dispositional property on the physical level, it's on the ecological level. This view is naturalistic in that it strives to be in harmony with visual science, but that doesn't mean it wants to reduce animals like humans to collections of neural activity in physical processes. The perceiver is treated as an active exploring animal, rather than a disembodied spectator who just takes the
Yeah, because you
colors in.
doesn't. It's not like you
Colors
just
are
stand
connected
still.
with affordances and effectivities, especially in their roles as categories and signals to us to satisfy our adaptive ecological needs. They reveal what the environment can do to us and what we can do to the environment. It's also worth noting that the colors we see are not the same colors that other animals
Yeah,
see.
I find this so
I mentioned
interesting
earlier
too.
that humans have 3 types of cone cells in the eye that process color, which makes us trichromats. But this is not the norm. Animals like squirrels, rabbits, some species of fish, and possibly cats and dogs only have 2. Goldfish and turtles have 4.
I'm pretty sure I
and
know
pigeons and ducks
for a
might even
fact
have 5.
dogs have 2,
Even
but
within
I
these
don't
categories,
can't.
there's
Oh, yeah, by the
variation.
way, yeah, I find it so interesting how birds have like some up to 5, and a big part of this, like again, they fly, so they need to be able to react to all sorts of things. What's also really interesting is the fact that this also matters because the reason why male birds are prettier than female birds is because the females have really high standards biologically. So, for example, blue jays. What happened is all the female birds only thought blue was prettier than black, so they only wanted to mate with the blue birds. So the genes are passed down where only birds, the blue jays had blue feather, or appeared that blue feathers were passed down. And that's the same with I know there's certain birds that are black that actually have ultraviolet sort of feathers that you can't really see. We can't see, but they actually have it. I find birds so interesting. That's why I have them.
Humans and honeybees are both trichromats, but the colors the honeybee sees is shifted towards the ultraviolet.
Interesting.
So why is this a thing? Well, colors aren't just pretty. They help us identify objects in the world by allowing us to segment visual scenes. And they also give us clues about the objects in the scene. They can show us how ripe a fruit is, or how hydrated a plant is. This leads us to Evan Thompson.
I want to react to something scary afterwards. I'll look that up and I'll see what it is, and then I'll decide.
Argument from perceiver relativity. Color vision helps us split up the visual scene into regions of distinct surfaces or objects. Color vision varies considerably throughout the animal
Because it depends on what's important to you.
The way we split up a scene
as a
is
species.
also likely to vary throughout the animal world. Therefore, what counts as a surface in visual perception depends on the perceiver. All of this makes sense when you consider evolutionary adaptation. Consider deep-sea fish, for example.
Yeah, they don't need to see
When
all
you're
these
that far
colors.
down in the ocean, things are pretty dark. These creepy little
you can also
guys
sense
are
the waves
usually
in the water.
monochromats, meaning that they only see the intensity of light, but no color.
And to be honest, that's,
A lot of
like
them
for
hunt
them,
their
that's all they
prey from
need. That's why
below,
they have it.
So their light perception is tuned to be sensitive to the maximum contrast to detect movement in their prey.
Because that's
the
all they
further
need.
up in the ocean you go, where there is much more light around, fish have much more variety in the colors they're able to perceive. Now, what about us humans? Since the 1950s, some people have
Notice too is again, some people only have 2 cones, and they're able to survive just fine. But there's a reason too why that isn't really passed down evolutionary, because evolution has dictated that for us 3 cones is most beneficial. Now I don't think there is anyone that exists that has 4 cones. I'll look it up after the video though.
Primate perception is configured actually co-evolved with colored fruits, and recent studies support this view too. Species of monkeys like macaques, patas monkeys, and guanons all have similar sensitivities in mid-wave pigment and long-wave pigment. They all look very different and live in very different habitats, but they also all eat a lot of fruit. These fruits, conveniently, tend to be very brightly colored and stand out in the green foliage. Now, why would these fruits be such that they're easy for monkeys
Oh yeah,
to
because when they're eaten, the seeds are farther away from the plant, so they're able to grow far away.
This is obviously great for the monkeys, but it's also in the fruit's best interest. The monkeys pick and eat the fruit, often spitting out the large seeds far away. They also swallow the smaller seeds and excrete them out later, likely much further away. This allows the fruit species to spread far and wide throughout the environment.
And then biologically they're
so it's evolutionarily
successful.
adaptive for them to look brightly colored for the monkeys, since the monkeys are doing them a solid. The animal and the environment co-determine
It's a
each
symbiotic
other.
relationship.
On an evolutionary timescale, it becomes clear that the colors an animal perceives are not arbitrary. They depend on the participatory relationship between the animal and their environment. The associations we have with colors reveal this harmony between us and the world. Thanks for watching.
What a great video. I find psychology stuff so interesting. Well, let me search this up on YouTube first before I link it to you guys. Let me search it here. Alright, I'll link the video to you guys. Definitely give it a like. Yeah, I'm gonna check Discord. Oh my god. Bro, this is great. I love this. This is great. So you have the ninja, and again, I chose blue just for the color. Twitch, we have the Twitch. Hold on, let me show this. So I want to show everyone how good this looks. Look how. Oh, let me have it in the middle so it shows. Look how good all these look. So we have a green one with a phone, which I could probably use for like social media. Discord, so now we can have a better Discord. Twitch. I love this.